McDonald a nice round of applause. You are the only satellite pastor that I liked, and that's why you're here. Okay. I love you.
Love you, brother. Love you.
There's a lot of truth.
Well, I cannot tell you what a delight it is to be here today and for this invitation to come and speak during this celebration of 60 years here on the Hill for Landmark. This church, this ministry will always hold a special place in Jenny and my heart. It'll always, on some level, be home to us. My mother and dad, Gay and Luther McDonald, they moved back from Casey County, Kentucky. There you go, to Cincinnati back in the fall of 1961. I was 18 months old, and they got into the Laughlin Baptist Church and became believers, decided to raise their family in church. And then in 1963, when this building was completed then, they moved with the Laughlin up here to these 170 acres here in Evendale and been part of Landmark Baptist Temple pretty much on some level ever since. My three brothers and I all came to faith as a result of this ministry. I was 8 years old, and in a second grade Sunday school class that met right over here, Mr. Alexander was the teacher's name, that worked with me and helped me form that prayer that invited Christ into my life. Jenny and I are products of the Landmark Christian School. Though Jenny didn't grow up in this church, she came to the Christian school, and she too came to faith in Christ as a result of this ministry, and it radically changed her life. Indirectly, our kids, we have two of them, now 4 grandkids, but our kids came to faith as a result of this ministry. And this coming summer, I will mark 41 years in full-time ministry, and to a large extent, it is due to this ministry. And so I love this church. I not only love this church, but I love your pastor, Matt, and absolutely, and his dear wife, Joy. Matt came on staff the year after I had come on staff, and again, as Matt said, I was pastoring over in Aurora at the Aurora congregation. I ended up leaving. Matt stayed, and he stayed all these years. He could endure the Monday morning staff meetings with Dr. John evidently better than I could. Matt, you are a dear friend and Joy, and we love you to death, though we don't talk a lot or see each other a lot. What a sweet, precious friend you are. And Jamie, so great to see Jamie this morning. It's been years for us, but Jenny and I, the memories that go back over 40 years before we were even married, and Jamie being in the area and preaching revivals at local churches, and we'd actually go with him and hear him preach and go out to eat and just had the best time. And what an influence he was on us early on in those years. And of course, Jamie ended up being my best man in our wedding. So I love these guys. There's absolutely nothing I wouldn't do for them. There's absolutely nothing they wouldn't do for me. And so we just go around doing absolutely nothing for each other all the time. And isn't that life? If you have a Bible, and I hope you do, would you go with me to Colossians chapter 1? Colossians chapter 1. I know the words will appear on the screen, the video screen behind me. You may have a Bible on your phone or on your tablet. I'm going to read verses 15 through 20 of Colossians chapter 1. Paul's the writer, writing to this young congregation in the first century in an area called Colossae, which was a region in the Roman Empire in the midst of Asia Minor. And he writes these words: He, referring to Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him, again that's Jesus, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. May the Lord add his blessing to the reading of his word and now the preaching of it. And so for just a few moments, I want to talk to you about this subject. Has it become routine? Has it become routine? Whatever it is in your life. It could be your life. It could be your marriage. It certainly could be your walk with the Lord. Has it become routine? Have you ever gone on vacation? If you haven't, and honestly, I think I know some people that I had a couple that I married at our church like 20 years ago, and they had never gone on vacation until 2 weeks ago. And they finally took a few days and went down to Gatlinburg. And I've been telling them for years, you got to go on vacation someplace. Just get away, do something. So if you don't go on vacation, you really should. There are benefits to it. Those who study this thing out say that simply planning a vacation will boost your happiness quotient up to 8 weeks prior to the trip itself. So the mere planning of it, the preparation that goes into a trip, will increase your happiness. And so, benefits going on vacation. Also, going on vacation will reduce your stress. Now, that is unless you have small kids, and then you take those small kids with you on vacation, in which case it will actually increase your stress. I tell people all the time, you have small kids and you go on vacation. You're not going on vacation, you're simply changing locations. All that you got to pack up half the house anyway and then take it, and you think you're going to go to Daytona and have a great time, and you get down there and you nearly have a heart attack because you're so stressed out with the kids in this new environment. But all things being equal, the American Psychological Association concluded that time off helps to reduce stress by removing people from the activities and the environments that they associate with anxiety. For the most part, we associate anxiety with our jobs where we work at, and so you can take a break from that. If you associate anxiety with your family, well, then that's a whole other story, and we probably need to have a discussion later about that. But you ought to travel. It'll do a lot of good for you. Someone said that jobs will fill your pocket, but adventures will fill your soul. There's benefits to travel. Mark Twain said 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones you did. So, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover, go. Travel makes one modest. You see, when you travel, you get to see the big world that God has created. You get to see the tiny speck that you occupy in that big world. It will keep you modest. Maybe you're saying, well, I'd love to go on vacation, but I can't afford it. And I get it. I tell our people at Crossroad, and something that I have tried to practice all my adult life, Jenny and I, ever since we had kids, and we had kids early on in our marriage, but it's this motto that you go as far as you can for as long as you can on what you can. You go as far as you can for as long as you can on what you can. So if that will take you on a safari to Africa, if that will take you to the beaches and the coral reefs of Belize or to the Andes Mountains of Peru, then by all means go, and go tomorrow if you can. If the possibilities for you are far more limited, then at least take a day or two off from work, stop at a Speedway gas station, grab you a couple of dollar hot dogs, a few bags of chips, some drinks, and go to one of the local parks here in Cincinnati. You can go to Eden or Alt or Hyde Park or Sawyer Point or Washington Park and over the Rhine. The point is, go someplace and see some things. Because when you see some things, you're going to be amazed at what you see. Do you take pictures when you go on vacation? There was a study done by Washington University that found that taking photos on vacation may not ruin the experience for you, but posting them on social media does. A lot of truth to that. Back in September of 2021, we took a trip out west, Jenny and I, and we took her dad with us. His name's Nelson Langfield, and he's here this morning. Thank you, Nelson and Carol, for coming. But we got to see sights that just blow your mind. If you've ever been out there, Arizona and Utah, places of that nature, mountains and canyons and rivers, things that will just take your breath away. Now, I know how thrilling it is to look at someone else's vacation photos. You know, it's like somebody gets back off of a trip and they say, hey, you know, you want to come over on Friday night? We'll grill some burgers and have some snacks, and then we'll look at our vacation photos. And you're like, well, no. You know, I think I'll just stay home and watch the grass grow, or sit on the trunk lid of my truck and listen to the dog bark. I don't want to come and, see your vacation photos. Well, with that being said, I kind of have a captive audience for the next few moments here, so I'm going to show you a few of my vacation photos. Now, before you get too anxious about it, I only have 4. I took them with my iPhone, and so I'll, quickly show them to you. The first one that will come up will be Zion National in Utah. What I want to do, I want to show you these pictures because I want you to see something that just will cause amazement. Now, really, the picture cannot do justice. All right, Zion National is, of the parks that we visited, it's probably my favorite. I just think that it's breathtaking. The next one is the Grand Canyon. Many of you have been to the Grand Canyon. If you haven't, you ought to go. Someone said seeing is believing, but that's not true because you can see this thing and you still don't believe it. It's just amazing when you consider that you look over the edge and you're looking down 1 mile. And then you understand that it's 277 miles long. I mean, it's longer, the Grand Canyon is farther and longer than it is from here to Knoxville, Tennessee. And it's 19 miles wide. It's bigger than the state of Rhode Island. It's amazing. The next one is Horseshoe Bend. It's in Page, Arizona. The pictures cannot do it justice. Jenny and I, as the evening wore on, we went over there and we got to see the sunset there. And again, it takes your breath away. And then we were in Sedona, Arizona. This is Bell Rock, and Carol, who is here with my father-in-law today, her family, some of her family owned this place right here where that patio area is at, and we stayed with them for a few days. And so in the evening, and Sedona is considered the prettiest city in America, and after being there, I think that's probably true. But we would sit out there in the evening, we would eat, and we would drink, and just fellowship, and then in the morning we'd have coffee out there, and you just look at this, and that's Bell Rock that you're looking at. And this is their view that they have every single day of their life, every moment. And it's like, do you ever start to take that for granted? Does it ever become routine to you? Do you ever stop being amazed by this? And of course, the answer is yes, you do. Because that's what we do. We grow familiar with things. There's no time to be bored in a world as beautiful as this, and yet we are. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, if the stars should appear one night in 1,000 years, how would men believe and adore and preserve for many generations the remembrance of the city of God which had been shown? But every night come out these envoys of beauty and light the universe with their admonishing smile. And what he was saying was this: because they come out every night, we don't even glance up. When was the last time you walked out at night and looked up into the sky and saw the stars and you were simply amazed? No, you walk out and go to your car or go to the store, do whatever. You're jogging, you're running, you're walking, and you don't even look up and think about the stars. We just take them for granted. They become routine. What if we could only hear, see, feel, or taste one day a year? Just one day a year, you get to see something. Can you imagine? Whatever you would see, it would be the most beautiful thing you've ever saw. Whatever you would hear, it'd be the most wonderful sound you've ever heard. Whatever you would touch, the feel of it. Oh my goodness. The taste. Your taste buds would do somersaults thinking, best thing I've ever had in my life. You see, a lot of things amaze us at first and then get boring later, not because they were ever boring, but simply because they got routine and commonplace and familiar. You get a new job and it's amazing. It's like, I would work at this place for nothing. And then time goes on and it gets commonplace and it gets routine, and now they can't pay you enough to work there. You get a new vehicle, a new car, a new truck, and you go to Kroger's, you'll park the thing a mile away because you don't want anybody to accidentally scratch the thing while they open their door, maybe into yours. You have that vehicle for about 10 months, maybe a year. Now you cannot park close enough to the front door of Kroger's. You could care less if they run a cart into the thing. You just want to be close to the door. What happened? I'll tell you what happened. It just got a routine. It just got commonplace with you. You get married. You finally get to live with, sleep with, have sex with this one that you love with all your heart. And you're over the top with it until you're not. And then it simply gets routine. How about a new church? You come to Landmark, you love it. Why wouldn't you love it? You love the pastor, you love his wife, you love the singing, you love the fellowship, you love the activities, and then it gets routine. You see, we humans have a powerful propensity to adapt after continued and repeated exposure. Seeing the same thing, doing the same thing, being with the same person again and again lowers its impact on our emotional experience. Put simply, we get used to things over time. We take them for granted. They become routine. They become boring, not because the thing in itself is boring, but simply because you got used to it. I mean, it's the Grand Canyon, for crying out loud, and you act like it's a hill at Sharon Woods. It's not that your marriage is boring. It's just that somewhere along the line you started taking each other for granted. And instead of delighting in the masterpiece God made for you and your spouse, one that's made in the image of God, you started distressing about what you thought you should have instead, and in the process lost sight of what you already have in him or her. Far too often we adapt to things that are thrilling, and then they become blah. We lose our excitement at what's truly amazing, and then we start the quest to find something else, something newer, something younger, something better, never realizing that maybe, just maybe, the best thing that you'll ever have is right in front of you. It's also one of the greatest spiritual dangers we face, because it's possible to see the beauty of Jesus, to be captivated by him early on in our journey with him, to know that we've been set free from the penalty of sin, to know that the Spirit of God takes up lodging in us, that the guilt is gone, the shame is gone, only for over time that beauty to fade and for it to become routine, and for us to eventually begin to fill that place in our lives where only Jesus belongs with lesser things. The Apostle Paul feared that for the believers here at Colossae. You see, the good news of the gospel of Jesus had reached that town. A church had started, but that church had a problem that every church before them and every church after them had to deal with, and that was to allow lesser things, the temptation to allow lesser things to obscure their view of Jesus and their appreciation for who he is and for what he had done for them. They were tempted to feel and act as if Jesus wasn't enough, to believe that they needed to add some Jewish legalism, if you will, or ritualism or mysticism to their faith. We do that too. It's so easy to let other things crowd in and obscure our view of Jesus, thus causing us to miss the beauty of something far greater, far more glorious than we can ever imagine. And so the Apostle Paul tells the church at Colossae, let me tell you about God. And the way I'm going to tell you about God is I'm going to show you Jesus. A little girl was drawing a picture one day. You probably have heard it before. And her mommy walked past in the kitchen there and said, "Honey, what are you drawing?" She said, "Well, I'm drawing a picture of God." And the mother said, "Well, don't you know that no one knows what God looks like?" She said, "Well, they will when I'm finished." Who is Jesus? That really is the question, isn't it? The Apostle Paul knew that. He knew that the main issue, Jesus, had been forgotten among the Colossae people. He knew that their primary need, again, was to take a long, hard look at Jesus, because once they did, it would end up solving a bunch of other problems that they had. It was like Paul was saying to them, until you get this thing right, nothing else really matters. Folks, you may be right about a lot of things, but if you're wrong about Jesus, you're wrong. It's not an exaggeration to say that these 6 verses that I've read to you in Colossians 1 is one of the greatest paragraphs in the history of human literature. It's dense with foundational and all-encompassing truth, and it's boldly Christ-centered, as is the entirety of the book of Colossians. Listen, if you want to see Jesus, read the 4 chapters of the book of Colossians. Most Christ-centered book of all 66 books in the Bible. These verses are filled with theology. It's expansive, but it's fundamentally about the power and the sovereignty of Jesus. It presents Jesus first as creator, and then as recreator, because the first creation messed up and he had to do it again. And thank God he did it again. These verses are generally recognized as an early Christian hymn celebrating the supremacy of Christ. It's as if these people would take these verses and they would simply sing them back to God, adoring him, extolling him. The word all appears 7 times in these 6 verses. The phrase all things appears 5 times in these verses. If God says something 1 time in the Bible, you ought to take note of it. If he says something 5 or 6 times in the course of 5 or 6 verses, you better sit up and take notice in a heartbeat. The repetition of all and all things here tells us that there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that lies outside of the supremacy and the authority of Jesus, including your life. If Jesus has become routine to you, if your walk with Jesus has become boring, mundane, all too familiar, let me encourage you to take a new look at the one who has a name that is above every name and see him for who he is and for what he is. See this one again who made it all. Again, in verses 15 and 16, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation, for everything was created by him. All things have been created through him and for him. Let me point out something here. The word firstborn here causes some people a lot of angst, a lot of heresies from the Arians, back in the 3rd century to present day heresies believe that this somehow suggests that Jesus was created. Doesn't mean that at all. Just read the rest of the passage. He is the one who is doing the creating. He was not created. Firstborn here is a word that refers to function. It refers to rank. When Paul calls Jesus the firstborn over all creation, he's not claiming Jesus is the first thing created. He is simply saying Jesus is Lord over all creation. Who made the world? Who created the universe? Who scooped out the deep oceans? Who stacked the mountains? Who created you and me? Every created thing bears the stamp made by Jesus. He is the originator of it all. He is the architect of it all. He is the builder of it all because he indeed made it all. Standing on a platform of nothing, he spoke a world into existence. As one said, he reached out where there was nowhere to reach and caught something where there was nothing to catch and hung something on nothing and told it to stay there, and it did. Then standing on nothing, he took the hammer of his own will and he struck the anvil of his omnipotence, and sparks flew everywhere. He caught these sparks from the tips of his fingers and flung them into space and bedecked the heavens with stars, and nobody said a word. The reason nobody said anything was because there wasn't anybody there to say anything. So God himself said by himself to himself, "That's good." I bet it was great. Jesus is the God who created this world. He is the God who controls this world. He is the God who has the absolute right to do anything with this world, for this world, in this world, or to this world that he chooses. You see, he made it all. But number 2, he sustains it all. The last all in verse 17, at the end of verse 17, says, in him all things hold together. In him all things consist. Not only was Jesus in view and the agent and the goal of all creation, but he also holds all things together. Hebrews 1 and verse 3 says he upholds the universe by the word of his power. You see, he holds all the world, all history, and all of our lives in his hands, and he keeps them ticking by the millisecond. Scholars tell us that this ancient city of Colossae suffered a major earthquake around AD 60. Therefore, either just before or very soon after they received this letter that we've just read here from the Apostle Paul, the entire city and all of its inhabitants were seriously shaken. Knowing this makes Paul's statement all the more significant, the point being that whatever stability or unity this universe displays, it is due to the continual touch and the presence from the Son of God. The risen Christ sustains and upholds all things, reminding us that however shaken our personal world may be, however shaken our personal lives may be, that he's got us. Jesus is the sustaining and the supportive power by which all that he has constructed stays in being. He didn't create only to skip town. He didn't create it and then say, you know what, I think I'll take a break and you're on your own. No, he didn't leave. Oh, I know she left you. I know he walked out on you. I know they left you high and dry. But Jesus has promised in his word that he'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. From the moment of its inception until now, and for so long as He so wills, Jesus sustains all things. He guides all things, and He is in the process of providentially bringing all things to their proper consummation in and for Him. He is, if I can use this vernacular, He is the divine glue that holds it all together. And folks, let me say, He can keep you together. He can keep your life together. He can keep your marriage together. He can keep your family together, and He can keep this church together. Hear me, people. Hear me, landmarkers. If you've grown a little stale in your walk, if it's all become a little too routine, a little too boring, then take a new look at the one who made it all. Take a new look at the one who sustains it all. And finally, take a new look at the one who paid it all. Verse 20, and through Him to reconcile everything to Himself, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through His blood shed on the cross. After each day of creation, God saw that it was good. But after He made humans, we read in Genesis 1 and verse 31, He saw that He had made them and He declared it very good. And then we get to chapter 3 and sin enters the picture. Sin came in and made that which was very good bad. And what made it so bad was not what it simply ended up doing to Adam and Eve, but was the fact that it separated Adam and Eve from God. That's what sin does. It separates families. It separates churches. And it separates man from God. You see, man has a problem. Man's broken. Man's a mess. I'm looking at a lot of people who are in a mess, who are a mess, and you're looking at one who is a mess. You see, we're all broken and we're all a mess. Every family's a mess. Every family since Adam has been dysfunctional, including mine and yours. All right? So we're a broken mess. And the problem, here's the deal. The problem, sir, is not your wife. The problem, ma'am, is not your husband. I know he's stubborn as a mule. He could shower more and he clips his toenails in the kitchen. I understand that. All right? But ma'am, he is not your problem. Your problem's not your parents. Your problem's not your preacher. Your problem's not even the president. Your problem is your sin. And it has separated you from a holy and a righteous God as far as the east is from the west. And here's the thing, there's not a thing in the world you can do to fix it. And man alive, we love to fix things. That's what we do. We fix it. It's broken, I'll fix it. I'll get it. I've got it. I'll fix it. You can't fix this. You are the source of your problem. You are not the solution to your problem. And that's another problem for us because we think we are the solution. And then we just make it worse. You can't do it, but what you can't do, God did. God can. God did it. He did it in the person of His Son. He sent Him who knew no sin to become sin for you and me so that we might become the righteousness of God in Him. You see, we owed a debt we could not pay. I mean, if you could live 10 lifetimes and you'd get better in each of those lifetimes, at the end of that 10th lifetime, you would not be good enough to pay the debt that you owe. The reason hell is for eternity is because you're paying off a debt that can't be paid. You see. So you owe a debt that you can't pay, but Jesus paid a debt He didn't know. He paid it all. And when before the throne I stand in Him complete, Jesus died my soul to save. My lips shall still repeat. Jesus paid it all. All to Him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Sin made us estranged from God. The cross brought us back to God. It reconciled us. That's what reconciliation is. It's the greatest love story that's ever been told, and that's what Jesus did for us on the cross. Because of His humanity, Jesus could take the hand of sinful man. And because of His divinity, He could take the hand of a holy and a righteous God. And then on the cross, He took both of those hands and He brought them together. And when they finally came together, He cried, "It is finished." And reconciliation had been accomplished. Folks, the key to your spiritual, boring, routine life is to once again cast your eyes upon the one who made it all. Cast your eyes again on the one who sustains it all. Cast your eyes again on the one who paid it all. Cast your eyes again on Jesus, as S.M. Lockridge used to preach. Jesus, talking about Jesus, he said He's God's Son. He's the sinner's Savior. He's the centerpiece of civilization. He's unparalleled. He's unprecedented. He's the loftiest idea in literature. He's the highest priority in philosophy. He's the fundamental doctrine of true theology. Are you looking to Jesus? He supplies strength for the weak. He's available for the tempted and the tried. He sympathizes and he saves. He heals the sick. He forgives sinners. He discharges debtors. He delivers the captives. He defends the feeble. He blesses the young. He serves the unfortunate. He regards the aged. He rewards the diligent. And he beautifies the meek. Are you looking at Jesus this morning? He's the key of knowledge. He's the wellspring of wisdom. He's the doorway of deliverance. He's the pathway of peace. He's the roadway of righteousness. He's the highway of holiness. And he's the gateway of glory. Do you know him? Are you looking to Jesus? He's Jesus. His light is matchless. His goodness is limitless. His mercy is everlasting. His love never changes. His word is enough. His grace is sufficient. His reign is righteous. His yoke is easy. And his burden is light. He's incomprehensible. He's invincible. He's irresistible. You can't get him out of your mind, and you can't get him off your hand. You can't outlive him, and you can't live without him. The Pharisees couldn't stand him, but they found out they couldn't stop him. Pilate couldn't find any fault in him. Herod couldn't kill him. Death couldn't handle him. And praise God, the grave couldn't hold him. He has always been, and he always will be. I'm talking about he who had no predecessor, and he will have no successor. You can't impeach him, and he's not going to resign. That's my king. That's Jesus. Landmark Church, visitors, myself, Jamie, Matt, he's our greatest need. And may we never get used to him. May you never settle for anything less. May he never become routine to you. He has sustained you, Landmark, for 60 years, and he's got you for the next 60 years, and then he'll just take you on into eternity. So take a new look at Jesus. Let's pray. Father, I don't know where people are at today. I know where I get to so often in my life. I know how easy it is. To take the most precious things in my world for granted. I know how easy it is to take you for granted. Bell Rock doesn't hold a candle to you. The Grand Canyon is like a little hill compared to you. You're above it all. You made it all. You sustain it all. All of it's for you. Oh God. Has it become routine for us? And maybe for some here this morning, it's never even started because they've never come into a right relationship with God through Christ and through his atonement on the cross. And so it's our prayer today that today would be the glorious day of salvation for them. Maybe this morning, in this place, at this time, as they sing in just a moment, maybe they'll just slip out and come and talk to someone about what it means to take the hand of the Savior by faith and to walk out of here a changed person for the glory of God. Have your will and way in Jesus' name. Amen.